Morning, everybody. How you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I am Sean Butler. Bugsy Malone has gone in for a swim, I think, over the hill over there. She'll be back in a second to say hello. But she's been barking all day, and she's not the only one who's been barking. Ange Postecoglou has been barking in his pre-match press conference about major changes to the squad that are going to need to take place if Ange is going to have his sensational second season that we all hope he can and will have. We're going to talk about those changes. We're going to talk about what he said, what it means, and go through everything. If you don't mind, guys, please do me a favour. Excuse the fact that this camera is on a phone today in handheld, and so it's going to be terrible visuals, bumpy, and a nasty experience for you. But hopefully the content will be okay nonetheless. So I apologise about that. My usual device is out of battery. Hit the like button for me on the video if you enjoy the content. I really appreciate it. Every single like helps the channel out, and you guys are sensational with your like game, and I really do appreciate it. Hit the subscribe if you haven't already. We're on the march to 25k. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's topics, and I do want your thoughts. I always want your thoughts. Actually, I'm not asking for your thoughts, mate. Let's start with basically where we're at. So Ange said in the pre-match press conference on before the Liverpool game, he wants major changes, right? He basically said that he 100% trusts in his system. Why wouldn't he not? Every time he's never got in the way. There's never been a failure before. So if it's always worked, then why would you change it? Now, he acknowledges that maybe the Premier League is a step too far, i.e. he's answering the questions of people that say he's out of his depth. But he says that until his dying day, he'll die on the hill of playing his system, and that's what's going to happen. But he acknowledges that he needs a lot of changes to his squad to do it, because he started dressing it up by saying when you go through a monumental shift from one system, one vision at a football club to another, it's entirely typical and common sense that not everybody's going to be on board with that shift. And you've got to think back and remember the fact that, you know, he said quite a few times in interviews that he prioritises the content of someone's character over their technical abilities. He thinks the gap between the very best and the second run down is not that big when it comes to technicals, but it's huge when it comes to mentality. And for him, it's so much more important to be focusing on players that fit the mentality side of the game, which makes sense. It does make sense. Now, before the Chelsea game pre-match press conference, I listened to the embargoed section, and the next day, Dan Kilpatrick put out a video, an Evening Standard report saying Ange Postecoglou kind of admits that not all the players are on board with his ideology. And I watched it back, and I was like, that's not what he said. So I was like, Dan, that's kind of clickbaity, mate. It's not what he said. He said in that pre-match press conference that there's some people that haven't got on board it yet. Or I'm paraphrasing, I'm making a bad job of it here, but basically the way I interpret it was that some people haven't learnt the system yet. Not that people aren't on board with it, not that he's lost the dressing room or any number of players within it, but that that these players are still figuring it out. Some of them are more ahead of others in the process of figuring out how to play his system. So I was a little bit like, don't cause drama where you know, the fan base is already split. But then in the pre-match press conference for Liverpool, he kind of did acknowledge that actually, there's some players who are not going to be on board this system. They're not going to appreciate it, and therefore he needs loads and loads of changes to stop in the summer. And he's talking about a massive exodus of players that are not the right fit, either technically or from a buy-in perspective. And obviously then he'll need new players to come in. Now, Paul O'Keefe then went out, I think it was Paul O'Keefe, made a list of 13 players or 12 players that he was suggesting are on that list. And most of the names on there, you would probably say, are not too much of a surprise. All the players that are on loan, Rodon, Tanganga, Ndombele, etc., Reguilon. And then a lot of players that are in the squad but probably want to leave or want to move on. Players like probably Lo Celso, players like Hojbjerg. And then there was a few players in there which were slightly more surprising, I guess. Maybe not that surprising, but Manuel Solomon, according to another report, his future at Tottenham is not set to be very long. And that's not the same as seeing his transfer as a failure. If he was a £50 million player like a Brennan Johnson and he wanted out straight away, then maybe you could certainly hold that one accountable, or James Maddison or a Van De Ven or whatever. But when it's Manuel Solomon, it was a free transfer and he spent the whole season injured, then it's entirely likely that that we could see him lead the club anyway. Richarlison's name was on the list. Now that's kind of music to my ears. I don't rate the player. Even though he's had a better season this year, I still think he's not the right guy. I also think that, we're talking about mentalities. I think the guy struggles with too many demons, and it's a lot of responsibility in a goldfish bowl environment of the Premier League to put so much responsibility on him to focus on the team and be completely bought into that, when a lot of the time he's obviously dealing with his own, however you want to call it, strength of mind issues, I guess is the way I'll describe it. And so I'm all aboard him going. Players like Bentancur and Kulusevski were rumoured to be part of the team, of the list of players that they want to keep, which is fine with me. And and so there's a lot of players there that you could hopefully see move on. Some players that maybe you're a little bit surprised about. Emerson Royal, he was one of the names on the list to go. And, he's someone that if you're going to tick boxes for mental resilience, he's certainly got it, right? He spent £1 million of his own money to better himself as a right wing back under the Conte system. He does a lot of personal training at home. He's someone that doesn't seem to be fazed by the negativity when he got booed a lot. There's lots of reasons to sit there and say this guy he does have the right mentality, but maybe Ange doesn't see him as the right player technically, or maybe he just hasn't bought into this system because he's not getting enough minutes and doesn't feel like he will increasingly under a Ange system. So there's a lot of turnover to come, and I'm on board it as long as the club, are resilient and back him. And I think that's the thing I'm asking for in this video, right? I think you have to. I said this yesterday with Ben on We Are Tottenham TV. I said it on Twitter. I'll continue to say it. I think it's too early to call time on Ange's system. I think you haven't had enough of a sample size to really understand whether it's going to work or not. I think that yes, there's reasons, and I understand those that are skeptical or have their questions. But I think in order to judge this guy, you need a couple of years. You need all of this season and all of next season. He needs to get his squad in place the way that he wants it, a team full of individuals that are going to buy in. And if there's a growing sample size, maybe if you read between the lines of what Ange was saying, of people that are not going to buy into it, then you've got to let him find those players that are. And he knows his system better than anybody else. He knows his system better than I do, better than Bugsy does, better than probably any of you guys do, better than any of the scouts do, any of the accountants, Daniel Levy, etc. And so I hope that when they have these transfer meetings ongoing, hopefully more than once a week and throughout the summer, I hope that there is, predominantly one voice in the room. Everyone comes to the party with their suggested answers, right? The accountants will come in and say, this is who we can and can't afford. The scouts will say, this is who we have and haven't identified. But I think that Ange should be leading the charge with that, because he's a scholar of world football, and I also think that if not on an ongoing basis, then he should have at least at some point had the lion's share of the opinion being heard around what it is that he needs, because he's inherited these people and they haven't played Ange before. I always say I do think that Ange he should take a group, wherever he goes, he should have his own group of people with him that know what they're doing. And it's very nice to know that you can walk into a club and he's the sort of guy that thinks, I'll just train up the guys to train up the guys. But I think that at this level is probably unacceptable. I think there was an intimation in the press conference as well that, or at least a lot of the ITKs are suggesting, that we do have intentions to get in a big time coach as well, which I think is super important. I'm sorry to say this, but Ryan Mason and Jedinak and whoever else, Ryan Mason's mate, there's like that other youngster in there. I mean, it just doesn't come across to me like it's quite at the level, and I think that a set piece coach that knows what they're doing is important. But I also wouldn't mind seeing someone come in who's a proper top tier coach, not someone who just happens to be a very loyal kind of puppy who's always around the club in Ryan Mason. No disrespect to him, but I think it's in his best interests, if he wants to have a career as a coach and a manager, to go out and kind of fend for himself a little bit, like a kid that leaves home when you're 18. Go out and fend for yourself. It would do him good. I think it will do Tottenham good as well to not always have the same faces around the dressing room in the kind of backroom staff. So I'm interested to know what we're going to do in the coaching staff. And like I say, a lot of the ITKs are suggesting that there is an intention to change that, which is good. I'm on board with all these changes. There's some of these players I don't mind keeping. Some of these players that are on the list I'm a bit surprised about. But again, I will hand over my keys of decision-making in my mind. I go, if Ange wants him, like an Ivan Toney, for example. If Ivan Toney is linked to Tottenham this summer, I understand why people think, no, don't want this guy. He's bad. He's a bad egg, bad apple. Spoils the broth. But he's also a really good player, in my opinion. I know some of you guys don't think the same, but in my opinion, I think he's a really, really good striker. Now, for me, I think that that's a decision that you trust on Ange. If Ange has the conversation with Ivan Toney and then comes out of it and says, okay, Ivan's the guy, Ivan, how would you say his name? Then I'm on board it. If Ange says, no, don't want the guy, then I'm on board that decision as well, because I think with someone like him, there's a lot of kind of maybe bad energy, bit of baggage with his decision-making in the past, with his gambling, his lack of accountability. He didn't say sorry to the Brentford fans for his absence for nearly a whole season. Lots of reasons to kind of go, are you all right, bro? Like, have some self awareness and take some accountability and apologise. But that didn't seem to happen. So I like the player, not such a fan of the person. Kind of the opposite of Richalison. I'm not a fan of the player, but I'm a big fan of the person. But in any event, I'd hand over that responsibility to Ange to make the decision. But like I said at the start, I've been saying this for a few weeks now, and obviously Ange is alluding to something completely different. And again, I'll lend to his experience and expertise on this matter. But to me, I would still argue that in terms of players coming in, you need 3 first-team players into the squad to give us a good shot next season. If you had a first 11 next year of Vicario in goal, Udogie at left back, Porro at right back, Van De Ven and Romero. In the 6, someone like a Polina or a Ederson or a João Gomez or a Kimmich, any one of those, or a Palacios. Look at my list of top 10 DMs that I would go for further information. So you put him in the 6, Pape Sarr in the 7, in the 8, and a Santiago Jimenez or a Benjamin Sesko in the 9, a Nico Williams off the left, and a Brennan Johnson off the right, or a Rafinha off the right and Sonny off the left. And on the bench you had Sonny, Kulusevski, Bentancur, another striker if you need one, but then a Lloyd Kelly or a Buongiorno or a Calafiori as the left-sided centre-back, Dragishin, another fullback, and a better goalkeeper. That's a squad that I think can do bits next season. It really is. Sorry, did I say Maddison in the 10? I think I did. Maddison in the 10. That's a squad that can really do bits. Now, if Tottenham can go and clear out a Lo Celso, even though I think Lo Celso, it's a shame that he hasn't worked out at Tottenham, because I really do like the player, but not enough to give him another contract, for sure. But if you get rid of Lo Celso, a Hojbjerg, a Skip, a Bissouma, Ben Davies, Emerson Royal, Richalison, Solomon, Brian Hill, Austin, Whiteman, whatever. If you get rid of all them and you get a bit of money in for all of them, you could put together a decent budget. It's just about how much time it's going to take to do that, how much willingness is there in Daniel Levy and the accountant side to negotiate and to have a little bit of wiggle room on suggested valuations, because if you're trying to get through 12 players, you can't spend 2 months negotiating on every one. There's not enough time in the day. There's not enough days in the summer. And there's not enough staff to handle each of those negotiations concurrently. So you're going to have some wiggle room. You're going to have some willingness to kind of go in negotiations in good faith. And Daniel Levy doesn't have too much historical track record, in my opinion, of being a good faith negotiator. I always think that one of his massive things that hold him back is that he sees every negotiation as a zero-sum game where someone has to win and someone has to lose. And that obviously creates conflict, resentment, and it takes time. It drags these things out. We haven't got this time. The Euros is coming up, right? That's going to make it difficult for any players that we're looking at. You'd hope they're participating, if they are European, for their European team. That's that's the level we're looking for. And so they're not going to be able to negotiate or come and do conversations with Ange, meetings, negotiations, and medicals and all that stuff until July. Then we go away for a pre-season tournament, which makes the whole thing difficult. So the window to get through 12 outgoings and 8 or 9 incomings, 7, 8 incomings, it's going to be difficult. It's going to take a hell of a lot of hard work. It's going to take a hell of a lot of, as I say, goodwill and the negotiations part, and a lot of insight. And I really hope that these players have figured out who they want, or these people have figured out who they want. They've got their shortlist and they go after it with the best intentions possible. And if we do it well, then Ange can have as close to what he needs, so that then we can judge him next season. And if hopefully we avoid a massive catastrophic injury crisis like we faced this season, then we'll be able to get the team together for a long enough sample size to be able to see whether we're improving, whether there is progress. And if there isn't progress, if by Christmas time we're still seeing the same issues as we've seen all in the last half of this season, then obviously question marks and concerns will be there, and we'll have to face that kind of bridge when we come to it. But I do believe that if you give this guy what he needs in enough time, then everywhere else he's gone, it's worked out, and I don't see there's any reason yet to call time on him or to even lose faith. I understand those that are questioning it. To always question is good. It's a scientific method. Always ask questions, but don't come to any conclusions just yet, guys. Even if Tottenham lose today against Liverpool, don't lose faith. We usually do lose to Liverpool, so anything other than that will be a really nice turnaround. I'm looking for a better performance, and I really want to see the guys at the top end of the pitch turn up and convert some of the possession we'll probably have. So Maddison, Sonny, Johnson, Kulusevski, Richalison, over to you. Over to you to do something with the possession. Bissouma, Sarr, over to you to keep the game going, win the midfield battle. And I know that my boys Romero and Van De Ven are going to have no issues. So let's see what happens. I'll see you for the live shows later on, guys, to discuss. I'm not sure if I'll do a watch along, but if I do a watch along, then I might not do a post-match show. If I don't do a watch along, I'll do a post-match show. So keep a lookout. Like, subscribe and comment, guys. Let me know your thoughts. Do you have faith? I do. I hope you do too. Like, subscribe and comment. And as always, bye-bye.